And I am now live. And I am now sending out the messages to the people that will care. And that would be pretty much. Oakley dokleys. And for those of you watching this on YouTube, please bear with me for a relatively long introductionary bit stuff thingy. I'll be putting a link in the description to jump to where I actually begin work. I tend to do a little bit of rambling at the beginning of these things, so yeah. Let's go ahead and bring up the, well, hold on a second, I gotta do one thing. I'm having an issue with my webcam. Yeah, there we go, much better. Alright. Good evening, everyone. And, oh, Shinji's not asleep. Oh well. Tonight I was going to be making a miniature for a female elven sorceress. See, it seems that one of my players is playing it, and I'm going back through, and for all the players in my game, I'm revising their figures. I had originally made them using meshes that are technically copyrighted, and while I could do this because I was only doing it for my own use, there's the problem with the fact that I therefore cannot distribute those miniatures, and people kept asking me for the STLs, and I could not give them. So since then, I've created my own geometry, my own base mesh that I'm using to make these miniatures with. Well, I never got a response back from her about some specific questions I had for her, so instead tonight we're doing a knight, a medieval knight. Heavy armor, you know, the whole 9 yards. And hello, Deacon! Welcome. Yeah, see, I'm going to go ahead and give him kind of fantasy armor, but one of the things that gets me is a lot of people think that medieval Asia had all these formalized and condensed and scientific martial arts styles, and Europe was all, me bash. No. I mean, there are Fechtbook, or fight books, and I probably mangled that horribly, that are exactly that. They're formalized scientific fighting styles for using medieval-style weaponry, specifically usually the longsword or the greatsword, but also the rapier and other weapons right around the time that people would expect that the average reader would be able to read it. You know, because if you try to do that in the Viking era, be like, what's all these scritches around the pictures, eh? But even then, they still had formalized styles that they talked to each other. No, this is going to be a human male with a great sword and heavy armor and in a traditional fighting stance. And what I mean by a traditional fighting stance, let me go ahead and pull up an image to show you what I mean. Let's see, it'd be a media file, and here we go. This, oh, wrong direction. This is an example of some of the standard stances, what they call the guards, for when using a greatsword or a longsword. About the only thing that would really change is, are both hands on the handle, or is one hand on the ricossa above the handle? Now, as you can see, some of these would work better for sculpting miniatures than others. The right here, where it says the inside left guard, those hands are so close to the chest, I'd have to actually sculpt the arms and hands completely separate, because there'd be no way I could get in here and detail the chest. Yeah, I'm not surprised you've used it as a reference, Deacon, because it's a very accurate, simple, and good sketch of the basic stances and styles. Now, the hanging left guard, which is down here at the very far to your left, that would be a bit more difficult to pose, because you got your hands doing this. Same thing with some of the others. Also, it'd be very hard to make a difference between the short, which is right here, and the closed left. And while I do this, I had a fuzzbutt show up. Yay! And does fuzzbutts wants pettins. Did the headbutt the hand routine. Anyway. So basically what we're going to do is, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to start it a little bit early. It's only 4 minutes after. I'm going to go ahead and, oh dear, I have the wrong window open. I need to have this window open. This is my base mesh. This is completely original geometry. Just some, the basic geometry needed to represent a human being, and it's got some detail, but not a lot, and it's got abnormal proportions to a real human, because a miniature doesn't have normal proportions. Anyway, we're going to start off by adding on both the clothing and weapons that we need. So we're going to start off. Now, here's the thing. Do we want to give him a classic greatsword, like a flamberge? Just to show you what I mean by that. Where is it? Yeah. Now, the weapons also look a lot larger than the real ones would. This is the flamberge. Basically a classic greatsword Zweihander with a wavy blade. Another option would be a rather basic fantasy greatsword, right here. A fancy fantasy greatsword, and another fancy fantasy greatsword. Or should I go ahead and go with the Claymore style greatsword? The Claymore style greatsword really doesn't go well with knightly types, though, if you know what I mean. I'm thinking about using the flamberge, but I also might use one of the two fantasy greatswords. The thing is, The thing is, a lot of the details will be added later when I'm actually sculpting on it, so the weapons are a little bit plain. So that would be Great Sword Fantasy 2. This one. You know, things like adding either runes or gems on the guard here, maybe adding on some bits coming off. You know, that sort of thing. Now, one thing about a human in armor is that you don't usually have the details that's on the chest visible. So what I did was I created this. Just kind of blends on. It's not in and of itself any kind of geometry, but what it does is when I bring this in for sculpting, it becomes easy to blend the edges in. And then once I've done that, I can then go ahead and turn this into an actual breastplate type thingy. Another thing that it needs hip plates and pauldrons. Now again, these are just oh so basic geometry. And when I bring this in to the sculpting, I'll be adding more details. But since we want to make this a full-on knight, one thing I'm going to be adding right now is I'm going to be creating, where is new primitive? I'm going to be creating those little discs on the pauldron. We want to create a cylinder, length of, let's say 1 inch, because it's a diameter of 2 inches, and segments of 1, accept. Alright, now, this is not real world measurements, obviously. We need to go ahead and X rotate 90, and then bring it up, bring it forward, over, up a little bit more, and we need to shrink it because it's too big. This is going to be more of a detail thing. Let's go to a front view, zoom in, and we're going to move it into position. And now we're going to go to a top view. We need to move it back quite a bit because it needs to interpenetrate, and we're going to rotate it. We need to move it back some more because it needs to penetrate the whole thing. And then a left view, we need to rotate it a little bit here. And let's go ahead and increase its Y scale. The reason being is because we need to make it sure it sticks out. Okay, and we need to move it back just a little bit more. The reason being is because the detail level that we will get from this disc is so low if we just leave it as it is. And once again, let's increase that Y scale till it's sticking out. Okay, and we need to bring it down and over a little. There we go. And now we need to create another one. Now this is going to be very simple because all I'm going to do is I'm going to create another one right down there. I've got this current one selected, and I'm going to copy selected items, go to the other one, paste selected items, and then I'm going to mirror the X translate and the Y rotate. Oh, that didn't do anything. Z rotate. There we go. And now we've got 2 of those discs. Now, it doesn't look right now, but it will after we get to sculpting, and we'll also be adding details to those discs. So what we need to do now, we need to parent them to the appropriate collar. This one goes to the left collar, and this one goes to the right collar. And hello, objects! And the collarbones, I've said this before, it's this motion. This is where the collar motion comes from. If you've ever seen Final Fantasy Spirits Within, for all the time they spent on the main character's hair, they also spent a lot of time just having characters move their arms from their shoulder directly with no natural collar motion. And it looks very puppet-like when they do that. So, the next thing is we're going to pose him. Oh, where am I? There I am. So we're going to go directly to the base figure. Now, as I always say, we never want the hips or the shoulders. The line from bone to bone, from the hip, bone to bone, shoulder, those lines should never be parallel to each other or parallel to the floor. Even if you're standing at perfect tension, you'll have ever so slight rotation somewhere. So we're going to rotate the hips. Well, first of all, actually, let's take a look at those stances again. You know, we want to decide what stance we want to use. So, these are the, as it says, the 14 essential longsword guards. And it can be used with a greatsword like what we're using. So, what we could do is we could do, well, some of them would, like I said, would be difficult to sculpt. The low guard would be decent, the high guard, you know, both the middle and right hand ones up here. Hanging right would be okay, but it would be in the way of the face, and it would make it difficult to sculpt a helmet of some kind. I mentioned inside left, your hands are so close to the chest it would make it difficult. Same thing with the close left. The short is even worse than the close left. The close right is basically just a mirror of the close left. The long and the middle both would have problems with, once I've got the figure printed, it won't fit in any of the cases or anything like that that I've got. You want me to do this. You want me to do this, which is only possible because humans are more flexible than 3D figures. Whoa, we got a Nightbot. Now, there's also the side. I don't think the back left. Right now, I'm thinking possibly either high or a variant of the ox guard, which is hanging right. Side would be good. Again, though, that would, you know, the problem with side is it'd be hard to sculpt on the helmet. And low has the same problem that middle has, that it once I finish sculpting it, it won't fit in my game case book. Oops, sorry. You know, where I keep miniatures in that. Or in those dice boxes that a lot of people carry their miniatures in to and from game. Back right. That's a possibility. Okay. Now, as we can see from the back right, the left leg is forward and the right leg is going back, but you'll notice the hips are pivoted somewhat and it's a slightly leaning forward stance. It looks like it's about 2/3 weight on the back leg, 1/3 of the weight on the front leg. So that you can push off with the back and step up with a rising strike. So, let's go ahead, go back to here. And hey, you can see Shinju again. Yeah. And let's start working on that pose. So what we need to do is we need to first, now that we won't change what direction the hips are facing. Instead, instead of facing forward like that, he'll be facing forward like this. So what we do is we're going to go ahead and twist that. Ow. When we do this, there's one thing we're going to do unusual. We're going to untwist the equivalent thigh on the hip plates. Oh, wrong one. Left thigh. The reason being is because otherwise they would end up looking rather odd. But we are going to note that it does tend to bend forward a bit, and it bends to that side a bit. So now our hips are no longer parallel to the ground. Now, let me go ahead and pull that up in a separate screen, so I can, in a separate window for me, so I can get a better look at it. That. And that was. Where is it? There it is. Okay, so. Possible that there's a bit more of a twist in the torso away, so let's grab both the chest and the abdomen, and we're going to twist them ever so twist them ever so slightly that way. We're going to lean forward on the side to side, and we're going to bend the abdomen forward but the chest back. This gives us a torso that is off-center. Actually, we need to turn those abdomen and chest a bit more. Okay, now let's go back to the lower body. We're going to go side to side with this leg a bit more and a little bit front. And then we're going to bend the foot in. And we hit Control D and just flatten the ground. And let's look from the front view at that foot. Okay, the foot is bent still, so we need to bend it a little bit more to get that toe off the ground. And then pivot like that. And there we go. Actually, we need to bring this leg forward more. Because we want it, because it needs to be in the center of gravity. And that would give us more, yeah. Front view. Just a little bit more there. And let's bend the toe up just a little because the tip of it's starting to go down. Now we hit Control D and it drops. Now this leg will be going back. In the real world, you can't bend your leg that far back. What ends up happening is, in the real world, is your hip actually goes back. your hip rotates forward. Your leg can only go like 10 or 15 degrees back. So that's a bit too much there. And then we're going to side, oh, there. And we're going to bend the toe. Basically what we're going to do is it's not going to be exactly like what you see there. We're going to make it a little bit more dynamic, because that looks like he's standing to receive. And now we notice that we now need to bring the toe up. We're going to twist the toe. I've noticed that almost all of the miniatures I've made in the past couple weeks have had one foot off the ground at the heel. Okay. Now, the lower body and the torso is in position. It's for the most part similar. Now, one thing we can't see in this image is which hand is where on the handle, but I'm going to assume that the right hand is on top of the handle the way we have it here. I'm going to bring it a bit, we're going to bring it a bit closer to the hand just so that we can have room. Now, he needs to move this collar back a bit, which is side to side negative. Okay. Now, trying to figure out from a brief pencil sketch how both hands are doing is kind of difficult. So, fortunately, I have something to help me. I have a 3D printed longsword handle. So the arm would be back like this, which means this shoulder would be down and this arm twisted out like this. It would be twisted at the forearm, not the upper arm. Yes, I have not just one, but two longsword handles that I've printed out. This one actually has a space where you can slip a fake blade. The intent is that these would be like painted up like a real one, and then you stick like a 4-inch section of plastic in, and then you slide that into a scabbard so that it looks like you've got a nice realistic sword for a con or something. But if they ask to piece bond it, you just go, why? Anyway, but it's also good for trying to judge poses and things like that. So, what we need to do now is we need to bring the arm down. So we bring it to a bend. And we need to twist it a little. And then bend it up just a bit. And then twist it. The hand goes side to side like that. Now this is a bit too far away for him to use properly. I think I need to take this shoulder and actually go side to side forward a bit. Bend this in a bit more and twist it a bit more to get that handle out away from the body. Now the hand is going too far back, so it's side to side it. Let's go for a right hand view. Okay, so we select that right hand. And we go side to side until it's almost on the ground, but not quite. And we go back to a perspective view. And I can already tell this is going to be problems. This is already going to have problems with trying to get it to... Yeah. This is not a good pose for the blade itself. So let's go ahead and select the forearm and the collars, all of those, and change all of the twists and side to sides and bends to 0. We've got to come up with another stance for the sword. So how about just a classic... It doesn't have it on this page per se, I don't think. There's a variant of the inside right where the blade's actually up here. It's actually closer to what it says calls the side guard, but it's a high guard. The blade is upright outside. So, yeah. Well, we've already got the lower body posed, or the torso posed. I want to keep this torso and lower body posed the way it is. So, what we're going to do is we're going to select this right collar. We're going to bend it down and forward. We're going to twist... Oh no, we're not going to twist the collar. That was bad. We're going to select the collar, the shoulder. We're going to twist it out. Bend it forward, up like this. Twist that, and we're going to side to side the hand back to there, and twist the forearm to be upright, and let's twist that even more. And let's unbend that because that's a bit too close to the body again. But go here. Okay. Now let's take this arm. We're going to have to play with the shoulder first. Side to side, we need to bring it forward. Then bring this forward. Bend the forearm just to get it in the right place. Now, bend the arm down. And the next thing we need to do is we need to go ahead. We're just going to use a drag the arm forward. And now let's drag it over. Oh, come on, don't do that. Yeah. There we go. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to twist the arm a bit more. We're going to Alright, let's see. Yeah. The problem is, let's just go ahead and delete these discs, because one of them would be completely invisible and the other one would basically be... Yeah, no. We need to bring this in a bit because it's too far out. As you can see, sometimes posing the figure can be the most difficult part of creating the character. A lot of tabletop miniatures will have poses that I really can't replicate using this method, simply because they can cheat on proportions. And here we have, he's stepping forward. However, we have the problem that his torso is now way off balance because of the sword. So we need to move, we need to bend the abdomen back and the chest forward. Okay. Now, we twist the neck and the head to face in the direction of movement. And result is, this is the current stance. And the problem is, his line of balance is on line with the blade. So we need to bring this thigh forward, and we're going to bend the calf a little, and we need to bring this leg backward. And we're going to twist the calf so that we can have the foot pointing in a different direction. Yeah, that leg needs to come forward. If possible, let's go ahead and get rid of the foot bend. And bend the foot. Trying to find a good pose that works is sometimes really frustrating. Alright. Yeah, that's... There we go. Let's go back to a front view on both feet. And let's take that hip and let's change that side-to-side balance. Yeah, there we go. That's much better. And whoa, what happened there? The foot decided to go inside itself. Get back to the feet. Burp. Let's bend this toe up a bit. And hit Control D, drop to ground, and when we look at it now, We need to twist this foot, but otherwise it looks a lot better. Oh, wrong. Let's go a left view on this foot, because, yeah. Okay. And there we go. And actually, let's go ahead and bend this head to the side. And let's take this neck and bend it back a bit. Give it more room. Okay. That is our basic pose. We need to change a couple things on the pauldrons just because there were some things we did to it, to the collars, that we don't want to happen to the collars of the pauldrons, namely the twists. The other movings are fine. So 35.15. Oh, 13. Yes, the shoulder twist. 35.15. Negative 35.15. And that makes that whole pauldron actually look a lot better. There's a section we'll have to smooth out up here when we get it into ZBrush. Now, the left collar, the left shoulder rather, twist is 11.72. So, left collar is negative 11.72. Now, here comes a big question. Yeah, cheating on proportions basically means my proportions are static. The length of the arm to the length of the upper arm are geometric. When they're sculpting a miniature, they can make that forearm a little bit longer and this one a little bit shorter to make it fit that pose that they need. I could theoretically do the same thing. I don't like doing it because people do notice. You will notice on a figure. This is the only pewter figure I currently have. And while it looks great, if you look very closely, well, let me get it in here and zoom in. If you look closely, you'll see that in addition to the standard miniature proportion issues, the forearms are incredibly tiny. The forearms are that big. So that a pose like this doesn't have the sword sticking all the way, way out, or be all the way up to the shoulders. He's got dinky forearms. Let me zoom back to. Now, put this back. I don't like cheating on the anatomy. It looks sloppy when you see it and you realize it looks sloppy. The proportions being different is one thing, but the overall anatomy being that sloppy? Okay. Now the next thing we need to do, and I'm going to need y'all's advice on this, y'all's decision. Okay. Should we give him a helmet or not? Or should he be, hanging free with his hair blowing in the breeze? What little he may have of it, because, knights really didn't have hair as much, I don't think. So should he be wearing a helmet? I'm going to say, grab some sody pop. Yay. Deacon object. I'm not going to ask Nightbot because Nightbot won't say nothing. If nobody speaks in the next 30 seconds, what I'm gonna do. Besides do my best impersonation. Ah, there you go. Oh. I'm gonna do my best impersonation of President Clinton. Now I've got me a biplanar decision maker. I was saying, should we give him a helmet or not? Should we make him, open face free with a, just his gorget and heavy armor and a big sword, or should we give him like a full closed face helm? I was going to be using my biplanar decision maker along with my bad President Clinton impersonation.
Well, which at least isn't as bad as my Ronald Reagan impersonation.
All right. Yeah, as things stand right now, there is literally one figure I have with a helmet. And that is the Sci-Fi Scout. Yay! He's got a helmet, but it's a sci-fi helmet. It wouldn't work on a guy with a greatsword. Unless you made it, like sci-fi armor with a sci-fi greatsword. Imagine that being like, I don't know, a Space Marine Scout with a great sword force saber. Okay, so what we're going to do, go back to the content library. One of the other things I've added is that. Yep. It's a smoothed out covering for the head that when we actually take it in will be a lot easier to sculpt into a helmet than the head that's underneath it. Now, it's not a helmet yet, simply because there's so many different types of helmets. The Saleh, the Beaujolais, the Bassanet, all sorts of different kinds of helmets. Now, what we are going to do now is we are going to hide a few things. We're going to hide the helmet. We're going to hide the greatsword. We're going to hide the pauldrons, and we're going to hide the hip plates. This leaves us with just the basic figure and the breastplate smoother thing. And we're going to export this. We're going to go to our broadcast. You can't see me doing this simply because, yay, it's got problems. And we're going to call it Armored Knight Body. Accept. Now we're going to make the mail and the breastplate invisible. Now everything's invisible, and we're going to make the helmet, the sword, the pauldrons, and the hip plates visible. And we're going to export this as Armored Knight Props. Now the reason why I did this is because this way I can sculpt on parts of it without sculpt and fuse, for example, the breastplate piece, that I'm flashing on and off here. Oh, where'd it go? There it is. I'm flashing on and off here. And the body at the same time without having to fuse everything together at once. Okay. I assume you mean a plume, Deacon? Alright. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and there we go. This is ZBrush. This is the fancy part. We're going to import the broadcast Armored Knight Body. And here it is. And we're going to add in a subtool. And we're going to import the props. Now we're going to make the props invisible. And then here we are going to go into geometry, and we're going to divide it up a lot. It's right now, well, it was about 23,000 polygons, which is not a lot actually. Then we're going to divide it up until it's, 1.4 million should do it. And then we're going to delete all the lower subdivisions, and we're going to Dynamesh. What this does, right now we have a couple areas where the mesh is intersecting itself. Specifically, this right here. So what we're going to do is by Dynameshing, it's going to fuse that into a single manifold surface. And Dynamesh. And oh, one thing I should have done before I Dynameshed. Just to make things a lot easier later, I'm going to close the mouth. So we're going to use Move Topological, shrink it down until it's the size of the mouth. I got to do this to make it actually fuse. Now, I'm going to Dynamesh it, and make sure to do it with some high resolution Dynamesh. And there we go. Y'all didn't see much, but if you look closely at where the breastplate part meets the body now, you'll see that it actually now has what looks like some little dots around the perimeter instead of a sharp line. And that's now where this comes in. My Wacom. Wacom. Grab my stylus. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to smooth out that borderline. Actually, let me go ahead. I'm going to do one other thing. I'm going to hide the forearms and hands. Make it easier to get to this area. We blend it all in. And smooth it up a bit, and smooth up here a bit. Now, the next thing we do, we're going to do something similar on the back just to smooth out some of the musculature. Is that part of the butt visible underneath the breast? Yeah, it is. So the next thing we're going to do, we're going to pull out the standard brush, pull up stroke. One of the things it has, lazy mouse, I don't like. Not for for some things it's great, but for what I'm doing here, it just overcomplicates matters. Now all I'm doing here is I'm smoothing it out, because that little wrinkle would cause problems. Okay. And I also noticed while I was working that there was a wrinkle up at the top of the bicep. That needs to go. So let's shrink the mouse a little bit and smooth this out. Okay. Now, let's smooth this out. That's the border of where the arm and the hauberk meet. A little ragged right now. We're going to eventually turn this into wrinkles down here. Now, the next thing we need to do is we need to make a breastplate. the best way to do this is not to make the actual breastplate a piece, but rather to draw on the trim of the breastplate. So for example, well actually let's start with the waist plate. So we're going to use, masking. What masking does, it basically says, okay, you can't sculpt on this area. The waist plate is going, okay, that's too big. Drop it down, yeah. And we're going to bring it around and down to here. And bring this around and down in the back. Let's make it a little bit sharper. And then we're going to erase some of the mask to make it a little bit sharper. Oh. And we need to erase in here just so that we can draw a sharper meeting at the base of this trim. Then, see, one thing is the waist plate was usually above the breastplate. Well, except in the back. Well, it was above, but it didn't go very high in the back. Let's trim that. I'm gonna have periods during this when I'm going to not be as talkative, simply because I'm a bit focused on what I'm doing. Okay. And let's make the bottom front a little sharper. Okay, and then we're going to add in the trim for the top of the chest. It's going to go kind of low. Okay. And then we're going to give it a bit. We're going to give him a bit of a gorget. But no, we're not going to do that yet. No. I did that so we could have the upper arms back, and I'm still going to make the hands and the forearms go bye-bye. Okay, because we need the collar trim for the underside of the top. Nope. And okay. Now I got to go in here and undo a lot of this masking that will end up being overlapped into the arm. Now let's zoom out and let's add the back side. Okay, and we're going to get back to that in just a second. Get on this side. Now, as I draw this trim on, oh, that's too far out. It needs to come back a bit like this. As I draw this trim on, there we go. We're going to make everything visible again. Zoom out. Now, the next thing I do is I go back to the subtool and I go to extract. I'm going to make it 0.02. Extract. Accept. There we go. Now the thing is, let's go ahead and hide the arms again. Now that that's there, we can go and basically I'm going to mask off the entirety of the belly plate, but not to extract it. But rather because here in a couple minutes I'm going to be drawing on it and only it. Once I've got the mask done and down, I'm going to invert the mask. And I'm going to take deformation and I'm going to inflate this. I'm also going to go ahead and make the mouse big. I'm going to grab move topological. And I'm going to grab that point and I'm going to pull it out to here. The reason being is because I'm then going to do the same thing to the trim of the waist plate. Okay, now I'm going to move topological. I'm going to drag it out to there. Now I'm going to polygroup, auto group it. Okay, now I'm going to hide that one. Actually, what did I do that for? I'm going to select it and only it, and now the rest of it is going to be pushed in some. It's going to be deflated a bit. I better be using the mouse. This one's more... No, can't do that. Dynamesh. Geometry. Dynamesh. Too much. No. 256. Dynamesh. Nope. It's it's merging right there. 368. There we go. That's good. And it's still in okay. Select that. Mask it. And now we're going to, let's do it this way. We're going to go ahead and simplify the trim. We're going to make the trim rounder. And we're going to keep the trim of the waist plate more rectangular. So that way it's going to be a bit more distinct. The next thing we need to do is we need to go ahead and we need to make the breastplate part sharper. We're going to use what's called the slash brush, but we're going to be adding a low intensity. And that's not good. Let's increase the focal shift a little bit more and shrink down the brush. And first thing we're going to do is we're going to draw a Y on here. And then we're going to draw on a Y here. Now, the next thing is we're going to draw a Y coming down here. Oh, too much. And this is going to be basically decoration. It's looking more and more like armor as we go. We also need to Z-sub and shrink in and draw a deep groove down the sides to represent the seam of the armor plates on the side here. We're going to add something similar to the trim on the waist plate, because that's the only part of the trim that actually will end up here. There we go. Now again, I've said this before, a lot of the detail that I end up putting on these things ends up being too much for FDM. Alright. Like, those probably won't be easily seen in FDM. Okay, with the pauldrons in place, it looks a lot more like armor. Move the pauldrons. Now we need to do the upper arm and the forearms. Actually, give me just a second. I need Sody Pop. And by the way, as you can see, you know, right here, the Nightbot has popped up with the Discord, the Thingiverse page, and the YouTube page. The next thing we're going to do is the armor. Armor. So, now let's go ahead and we're going to hide the armor. Also going to hide the chest, the waist, the neck, the hands, and the colors. Let's hide the colors too, because we don't need them for what we're going to be making. And then let's just hide the whole area there. Now, here's our arms. We need to put armor on them. The first and biggest thing we need to put on these arms is going to be go away so I can see what I'm doing. It's going to be the arm cups. These will go at the bend of the elbow on the back of the arm. We're going to do the same one over here. It's a slightly different spot for the arm bend, but now we're going to shrink him, shrink the brush. We're going to make an angle, make it like a pie piece that goes over the arm. And here. Let's go ahead and hide the head too while we're at it. Let's hide everything except the arms. Now, these arm cops we're going to extract, but we're going to do it at a thicker extraction. That was at 0.02. This is going to be at 0.035. Extract. Accept. Draw that. Now, they're kind of rough, so what we're going to do is we're going to geometry. We're going to dynamesh them. And then divide them. And what we're going to do is we're going to first polish some areas that kind of need it. That's too much. Polish some areas that kind of need it. And we're going to sharpen those edges. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to use slash. So, let's go ahead and very gently. We need to make this bigger and a little bit stronger. And we're going to bring it around. And again, it may look like it's sticking out hugely, but when it actually comes time to print, you'll realize that the detail didn't really stick out as far as you thought it did. I've had issues with that, especially on the Space Scout that I showed earlier. Actually, let's go ahead and take off that. I've got a better idea. I'm going to use layer. Go up all the way, and we're going to come up along no yeah, I know. Well, we're gonna block off the corners of these. Yeah, and let's clean up the masking job a little. Oh, by the way, if there's anyone who's a potential fan of that upcoming new football group, it's gonna flop. I give it 2 years at most. And again, I don't like football. Give me basketball any day. That's a way to start some arguments at some places I know. Okay, so then I'm going to go ahead and go down to deformation, and I'm going to deflate everything except that. I'm going to select it, and I'm going to subdivide. A little lower, and then I'm going to smooth it. Let's increase that. Then I'm going to use the slash at the edges. Still not telling it. Oh, I know why. I forgot to turn off Lazy Mouse. Yay. Nope, still not strong enough. Brr. Now this is going to sharpen it, and it's going to actually sharpen it more than the printer can do. Now we're going to polish the underside. You also notice that we need to pull this a bit. Oh, and get a bit of smoothing just to even things out. Smooth is a wonderful brush. Now, we're going to go to the other side. And we're going to do the same thing. And there's that edge. Actually, we need to smooth that a bit more. And draw this out. Oh, mistake there. Mistakes happen. So, I've been oh, I'm gonna follow this as close as possible. And yeah. Okay. Now we're going to use inflate. Make it bigger to basically make these arm cups rounder the way they were, and then smooth it out a bit the way they were in the Middle Ages. Smooth that out. Okay. So, I don't know if you heard about what happened to the UPS office in Illinois, but it seems that for about a month they got no mail. Frame out, zoom. Oh. Yeah, for about a month they got zero mail. And I don't so much do tutorials jumping zebra as much as I take these broadcasts, these live broadcasts, and upload them to YouTube. Now, the next thing we're going to do is the upper arm armor. And so we got to go back to our basic, the actual person, and we're going to make what's called rear braces, or rear braces, or however you pronounce it. And what these are These are basically your upper arm plates. Oh, I forgot to okay. Make this smaller just a bit. I forgot that it never did remove the the masking from when we made the arm cups. What we're basically doing is we're drawing on where we want the rear braces to be, which will cover most of the upper arm. Okay, and then we're also going to make some vambraces, which is the lower arm. And it's going to be similar. It's going to come out and it's going to end just before it meets where the wrist is. We don't want it to go over into the wrist. The upper arm will get covered by the pauldrons, but the lower arm will end at the hands holding the sword, which we will be putting a plate onto the back of the hand to represent a gauntlet, you know. But we don't want the bracer to completely overlap here. Okay. And we blend it in and a little bit here. And we, once again, like we did before, we hit extract. But this time, once again, back at 0.02. Actually 0.025 because there is an issue. And accept. Nope, that's too much. Let's go ahead and remove that. Go to here. And we're going to make it 0.015. Extract. Accept. Much better. And yeah, it's already looking very much like armor, which is excellent. Let's hide our extra bits. And the next thing is we're going to go ahead and we're going to add on that what I mentioned. That what I mentioned, the thingy with the stuff and the hand bits and the thing. Yeah, that's what I mentioned. Basically the intent is we're not going to be able to demonstrate the full totality of gauntlets, especially not on something this small, but we can simulate it by just having armor in the back of the hands. If you look carefully, a lot of Warhammer human and Eldar figures do something similar. Okay, so now we have all of the upper torso armor. Yay! We got upper torso armor. Time for soda, as we hide everything we just made. because the next thing is the lower torso. Yeah, and as we did before, we're going to hide the arms and hands. The reason being is because we don't need them for this. Now we can see generally, we can see where the waist plate stops. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a cop. A cod piece. Because do you know any athlete in any sport, any male athlete in any sport that could become contact, that doesn't protect his manliness? Stupid hiccups. 0.02 extract, accept. And then we're going into the geometry. We're going to dynamesh it and subdivide it a couple times. Yeah. Now we're going to give him a bit of a ego. Inflate this, make it more bulbous. And then we're going to take, after we've gotten it, we're going to move topological. We're going to drag this down there. We want it to cover what's being protected. And then we're going to see if... Okay, yeah, we still need to tweak where it meets the trim. It goes underneath the trim. Especially at the point here. Then we're going to take our slash and shrink that, and we're going to sharpen the edge. And then we're going to Z-sub, and we're going to carve inside the edge to make it more of a trim. And then inflate just a very slight around this edge. Once again, it's trim. And let's smooth out where it meets the belt. Okay. Now the hip plates will cover most of the rest of the backside, or everything but the backside. That's okay because the backside is going to be turned into mail, and I mean chain mail, not, yeah. Anyway, we go back to the basic body with scrape, and we're going to add on knee cops the same way we did the elbow cops. So let's select the knee. One thing we're going to do slightly different with how we do the cops, and that's the insides of the knee are going to be shorter and the outside is going to be longer. Let's go ahead and wipe that down. And they'll have a shape to them. Because that's how knee cops were. The outside of the knee cop had a shape to it. Okay. And let's cut this in. And zoom out. And we're going to extract it at 0.035, just like we did for the arm cops. So it looks like it's on top of the other armor. Okay. Now, oh, pardon me about my back is hurting. Looking at it real quick, there's one thing I'm going to do on this right here. I'm going to go back to slash, shrink down brush. I need to draw a little trench here and then here. Just to emphasize that it is on the plate. Okay, let's go back up to here. Now, what are we going to do to our knee balls? Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to Dynamesh and subdivide it a couple times. We're then going to go ahead. This one's going to be. We're going to handle this slightly different from how we handled the arm cups. And let's. And then we're going to smooth it. It's going to help us get the shape we need. The reason I'm doing it differently than how we did the arm cops is to show that there's always more than one way to accomplish any given task. That's that one kneecap. And now this one coming out and around. Turn. And come down and around underneath. Turn and then come this way. And then we smooth it. Okay. And we have our knee cups. We go back up to our subtool, our main human person thing. And now we need the chausses, the upper thigh. And so what we're going to do, we're going to mask off the leg. We're going to come down like this. And it's going to come down in the front and then come back up, because the knee has both. And then we're going to come back around And there's the... I'm going to bring it out from underneath like this. Block off some of that. And the thing is, I am drawing on a lot more armor than was actually worn on the backs of the legs. You see, they actually usually had the backs of the legs open with only the mail showing through, the chainmail. Whereas this will be full solid thigh protection all the way around, although I will have a seam visible. Okay, and then coming from here, we're going to go up. And we color in and we need to blend it in there and in here. Oh, and down here. Okay. Then we're going to add on greaves, the shin plates. Come down. We're going to come down the sides because it's going to come down to protect the ankle. Now let's make sure we get this done. And then this is going to come around like that. Okay. Now let's move back around to here. We come down a bit. Once again, we don't have to be as worried about being entirely historically accurate as long as it looks like armor. And one of the key things about armor is that it actually protects you. Which means there's a lot of fantasy armors, especially a lot of female fantasy armors, that I can understand the aesthetics of it, but it doesn't look like armor. It looks more like, well, there's a series of books by a man named David Eddings called The Belgariad. And at one point, a female character who realizes she needs to be the figurehead for an army because someone who is going on a very dangerous secret mission to save the world needs a distraction. She has basically costume armor made. And that's exactly what this is going to be. This is, you know, some of the, or not this is going, but that's exactly what happens with a lot of that armor that you'll see that's got, you know, it's got your stupid, you know, it doesn't look like it would actually protect anybody. And here we have, for the most part, heavy-duty armor. Scroll down, make the props visible, and it's looking more and more. So now we need to take these props, and we need to subdivide them a couple times. Okay, now before we do any other things, we need to move these so that they're not having the other armor plates poke through. And this one can actually come out a bit. You want to try and make these look more like, what would these realistic plates be doing with their legs and all that in these poses. It's not just preventing the poke through. Oh. It's also selling the pose. And part of that is that the leg plates would probably be poking or flying out a bit more, a bit wider at the bottom. So we go ahead and move these out. Especially at the points. Yeah, a lot of those fantasy armors makes me think of it's costume. It's not armor. Especially on a lot of anime and video games. I mean, Elder Scrolls, Skyrim and all the rest, does a positively brilliant job of making female armor look just as protective and just as solid as the male armor. However, there's games like Terra, where you pick up, you both pick up the same armor. Let's call it holy insanity armor. I don't know. You both pick it up. The man puts it on, and it's this huge, heavy-duty tank armor. It looks like it would stop a shot from a machine gun like nobody's business. The woman puts it on, and she's wearing basically lingerie with with a steel bra. Alright. I'm thinking the next thing we need to do is go ahead. We're going to polygroup this, auto-group it. The next thing to do is the helmet. Let's hide all the rest of the subtools. Except for the head. The reason we're not doing the head is because we're going to be using transparency. We need to be able to see where the eyes are. Okay, now let's try and turn it so that the head is as close to profile as possible. And now what we're going to do is we're going to draw on a wedge, and then here, here, we're going to draw down, we're going to draw up a nasal. Let's make it a little bit wider. Then we're going to invert the mask and pull that in. Let's untransparent it, and then we're going to smooth out all of this. No, we're not. We're going to grow the mask and then smooth. And there we go. Now we're going to undo the mask. We're going to start moving the shape. Okay. Oh. Shrink this. How did I do that? Yeah, I accidentally had the back of it masked. Oh well. Move this out. And smooth that out. Yeah. Now, we're going to use layer. And we're going to draw on. Ow. This way, when the strokes overlap and you get a double-sized layer, that's a rivet. Same thing happens when I go here. No, it's not looking good like that. Let's do the masking bit. No. And what we're doing is we're making the trim around the visor and nasal area. This is going to be mostly an not an open face, but a lighter helmet, not the full nightly helmet. Mostly because a full nightly helmet would take quite a while to sculpt, and that would be easier for me to make one individually instead of just a blank helm. And then bring this down. I gotta make it a little bit wider. And then once again, we're going to invert the mask. Inverse. But this time we're going to inflate the areas that are masked. And then we're going to smooth the inner edges. And once we got these all clear, okay, and then just the light around the trim. Now the reason for this is we're going to be inflating it again. And the result is it will cause it to have an apparent seam where it meets the rest of the head. Or helmet, rather. So it'll look more like trim and less like stuff slapped on. Okay, let's bring it forward again. And we're going to inflate again. And then we're going to go up here to polish, and we're going to 100% polish. There. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to draw on a rather large circle just off center of the back. Because that is not no, that doesn't work. It's got to be all right. Okay, it's going to be here. No. Let's shrink this down. Let's draw a line. And then we're going to inflate this area here. And what we're going to use this for is this is going to be our basically our the basis for our crest. Okay. Now it's going to be organic looking, so it's not going to be all shiny and stuff. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to use what's called a snake hook. This big, oh, it's grabbing too much. And pull it out a bit. And then we're going to smooth it all. Oh. Yeah, I'm thinking we're going to just kind of remove every bit of that attempt at a trim. That didn't, no matter what I tried, nothing really looked right. Now, let's pull back. Let's make the rest of this visible. I'm going to add on both sides of this sword, I'm going to add a sideways gem right here. And what I did is a while back, I created a brush that basically makes gem in a setting. The way you usually see it on, oh yeah, I can't do that on this mesh yet, geometry, lower. Okay. And that's a big oval inside an oval loop. Same thing on this side. There. Let's give it a couple smaller ones for people who have the more detailed printers on either side. Just to show how this is in fact a fancy sword. Now, frame. And then if we make everything visible, yep, everything's visible. He's looking pretty heavily armored already. But there's still a couple things we need to do. One thing is we need to inflate those kneecaps because they're getting lost in the regular armor. So let's take this geometry, let's divide it one more time. Delete lower, deformation, we're going to inflate. And they're a bit more visible now. The next thing is we need to modify those hands. You see, hands have the small problem that no matter how well you do everything else, if the hands don't look good, the miniature doesn't look good. It looks sloppy and slow. Or sloppy and brushed, rather. So we hide all of the other subtools. We're going to work on these hands. Now, we need to go back to inflate. And hello, Gonzales. Okay, I do not speak Spanish. This not in this place? I don't understand what you mean, Gonzalo. I'm gonna make the knuckles by inflating the knuckles. Normally I'd also go ahead and draw lines down the back of the palm, but since the backs of the palms are covered in in armor, it doesn't matter. Now I've got to make at least 2 knuckles for each finger. So I use the pinky as a guide on where to put them, and then they each go a little bit further forward and then back on the index. And then here, here, here. And I'll use the index for this there and there. Then bring it forward, back, back, forward, back, back, and then I'm going to smooth between the fingers. It's going to flatten out parts of the knuckle, and I'm going to have to end up going back in and redoing the space between the fingers with the slash brush. And then eep, 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 and then here. And then the same thing here. And here. Then I've got to do it. Oh, that's a little bit too harsh. I got to do something similar, but with a bigger brush at the base of the thumb and at the joints of the thumb, and smooth out the joints. And it makes the hands, from a distance at least, look a lot better. And you want that from a distance because that's what, you know, a miniature is it's from a distance. Now I need to inflate in here so that the thumb kind of fuses, because I got issues sometimes with the bending of the fingers. And that basically fixes our bending issue. Now I need to sharpen the space between. It's that big. And that would be from here. No, increase. Okay, and then we go there, there, and there. Now the proportions are not accurate to reality, as I said. This is for printing 28mm miniatures. And I'm only making a figure in about 2 hours. Now, let's go ahead and make the rest of it visible. And frame out. And hello, Jumping Zebra. I just noticed you're in here too. Gonzalo Hernandez 3D, if you could explain what you were trying to say, because I honestly don't understand what you were trying to say there. Well, anyway, we're going to go ahead and scroll here. We're going to append one more poly mesh, and we're going to import in a basic base. And divide it a couple times, delete lower, and we're going to move it. We're going to offset it in the Y. Too far. Oh. That's about right. And now let's see, where is it? Okay, it's too far forward on the base, so we need to offset it on the Z. Oh. Now it's too far on the X. There we go. Now let's frame. Notice how our figure sits on his base. Going to the subtool, and we're going to start merging everything together. And the way we do this is we go to merge. Merge down, always okay. And then we just merge all these subtools into one. And there we have it. Oh, I see one thing we got to do first. Right down here, I need to smooth this to give it a gap, because we need that gap between the wrist and the forearm to be a little bit bigger, very obvious. Okay, now close the subtool, open up geometry, and dynamesh the whole thing. Closes holes, processes the mesh, and it fuses it into a single watertight surface. Okay. Now that we have 1.342 million polygons, what we're going to do is we're going to zoom in and we're going to double check to make sure that everything fused together into one. And I see one spot we have to make sure that we mesh smooth. And that's in here. There. Now, next thing we do is, well, let me put my tablet up because I don't need it now. We now need to reduce the poly count because right now it's 1.37 million polygon, or 357. So we're going to take it, and there's a thing called Decimation Master. We're going to decimate to roughly 35,000 points, which comes out to about 70,000 polygons. That may sound like a lot, but it's not really. And as we wait, it's gonna stutter while I'm waiting on this. Reading go Z file and 70,000 polygons. And yet, from our point of view, looking at it, it looks like it's the same polygon count. It doesn't look, because it calculates where it needs to remove those polygons. Now let's zoom out. And we still have our big old sword, our heavy armor, our detailed hands and the proportions and everything where we need it. But now it's one single watertight surface. So we go up here and we export it. It's going into our armored knight figure. Let's say armored knight greatsword. And it has exported. And that is our figure. You can see how it looks in other little special fancinesses. All metallically bronze and stuff. Or, let's say just straight up metal. Maybe this metal instead. Let's see, do I have a pewter? No, I don't got a pewter. Wait, yeah, I do. It's kind of a pewter. This is how it would look as a tabletop miniature. Very clearly an armored figure. Maybe not as detailed as it could have been, but very clearly an armored character. Alright. Well, that was the show. Okay. Oh. This is called the Mug O Can. It's also in Thingiverse on my profile. If you're watching later on YouTube, over here in the chat, Object asked what this was. What I do is take it. Take a Coke can, which this one's telling me I need to share with the MVP, which I think is me. I always take the thingy off, put it over here, and then just slide it in. Yeah. So anyway, tonight we did an armored. It was actually my first attempt at making a heavily armored character. It could have gone better, honestly, and probably would go better if I wasn't as kind of rushed as I usually am when doing these videos. But this Sunday, the day after my Saturday game, I'll probably have more information where I can actually sculpt the elven sorceress that is being played in said Saturday game. And I'll be able to make, is she going to be blasting with an energy blast? Is she going to be holding up a shield? Is she going to be, energy shield? Is she going to be just kind of sitting there going, "You're on your own, buddy"? That kind of thing. Well, it is 10:10, not to be confused with the famous European comic book Tintin. And I'm going to be going ahead and heading out for the evening. As soon as I can see my hand count down from 5 to 1, I will be logging out. Well, let me say goodnight. Say goodnight to Shinju. She's already racked out. And so it's going to be, well, let me refresh the Twitch page because it has a tendency to get massive amounts of lag while I'm working. And so what's going to happen is there's probably going to be lag after I reach the 1 and react. So I'd like you all to say goodnight in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.